Okay, so now we're going to make the very rough scarf. I sent it as one of the pages. It's it's this one right here, and it was inspired by this lady on Instagram. Okay, cannot minimize Zoom space. Okay, well, I can't show you her. She's a beautiful woman that's made one that is like it's a shawl, and it's the classical directional shrinkage. So on this document, what you're going to be doing is down the middle of your scarf, you're going to be placing about 1/3 of your wool just in one direction. And then on each side, put the wool in the opposite direction, going horizontally rather than vertically. This is what I'm doing, but I'm making something bigger than you guys are. Mine is going to be a shawl. So what happens is this strip in the middle here, this shrinks this onto itself, right? It shrinks like this. The things on the side are going to shrink in, and that's why I want you to put 2/3 of your wool on the sides, because it will get more narrow, and you want a nice, ample ruffle at the side. What makes these sides ruffle is because in the middle they're being pulled inwards. It's almost like putting an elastic band into a waist and a skirt, right? The elastic band shrinks down if it's stretched, as shrinks out, and nothing ruffles around it. But when you put it on and it shrinks back to its side, you get a ruffling of, I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's what's happening in this scarf. Um, Now this scarf on the woman that inspired somebody wanting to make this, I think it's Elizabeth. Pretty sure it was Elizabeth. Anyway, no, Martha. Sorry. You'll notice if you were able to see it, it is just covered with viscose, and that I am going to demonstrate. And viscose, I'm using Tencel, of course, as everybody knows. Uh, this is a good example. The wool, I'm going to put this over here again and demonstrate on the table so you have good lighting. Okay. On one side is the wool. That's the wool that you're going to be putting down. On the other side is the viscose. Now this, on one side is the wool. The other side is the viscose. And this viscose is put down so heavily that it almost looks like you put down a piece of margolin silk or shiny silk, but it's flat, it doesn't wrinkle. What I was showing you here, again, experimentation, is if you have a hole in your wool, like this, you put down viscose, that's what it's going to look like. Kind of cool, might look nice at the end of a sleeve or something, or up near your shoulder. Um, and depending on how much viscose and wool you use, it's either stiff or it's very flowy. Like this one's pretty flowy, very flowy. So viscose will flow better than wool alone, or better than wool with a silk fabric. And that's why it's commonly used, particularly with the Eastern Bloc women do this all the time with their work. So that's what you're going to be doing. Um, and once you get to the point where you've got enough of your wool laid down in those two directions, then I kind of demonstrate the amount of viscose that you want to put on it. Any questions before you get started? I'm using 3 colors. I'm going to have a little bit of an ombre thing going. You can have it patchy. You can do it any way you want. You can have a solid color and use different viscose colors, whatever.
Katie, I do have a quick question on the wool. I understand that we're going two different directions. Are we doing only one layer?
2 layers.
Two layers of wool. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so yeah, the thinner the layer, I do I go I this is a very good question, Lynn, because people ask this all the time. It's not the number of layers that's important, it's the amount of wool that's important. And that's why I always give you an approximate amount of wool per square inch, and then I calculate that to the total, um, because it's the amount of wool that gives you the flowability. And the more layers that you put down per the amount of wool, the better product that you're going to get. And that's why the what do you call it? The skill of laying down really thin layers is a valuable tool because you can do extremely thin and have no holes, no anything else. But the more layers, the better. But it's not the number of layers; it's the amount of wool per square inch.
Okay. But then, but I'm just a little confused. So down the midline, it's north and south on the shingles, and then on the edges, it's east and west, but we do each layer separately, but in those directions. There's no overlapping.
I'm going to reiterate it and make sure that I understood. Okay, so down the middle, all of the layers are going to be north and south. So I'm going to put down 2 layers. But so there'll be 2 layers on top of each other. They're going to be shingled and overlapping on the first layer and shingled and overlapping on the second layer. But all of them are going to be going north and south. Then when I get to the sides, it's exactly the same thing. I'm going to put 2 layers down because I have very little wool that I'm going to put down. But it's going horizontally, right to left and for both layers. So there's no crisscrossing in the middle and there's no crisscrossing on the sides. Is that what you meant when you said that?
Um, I I'm still confused. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, no,
You
no.
showed us well, you showed us the picture of the finished product and then the layout there.
Yeah, so
Yes, yeah.
here. So
Oh, yeah.
here is the layout on your table. So the arrows that go downwards, you will be putting a wool for the middle. All of the wool that you put in the middle is going to be going up and down
Okay.
in a shingled fashion.
Okay.
And then the same goes for the 2 sides, but they're going to be going sideways. And because
Okay.
they're going sideways, they're going to shrink in that direction, right? Because that's the direction that you placed them in. So they're going to shrink inwards. And that's why you want this to be wider so you don't have this tight little, you won't have much of a ruffle. So whatever you put down on the sides, it's going to shrink in that direction.
Right.
If you put it crisscross, it would shrink in both directions, and so it would shrink less in this direction.
Okay. So where the gray is, we're going to put two layers, like I would call that north-south.
Yep,
And then the edges where the white is, we put two layers east and west shingled.
Correct.
Okay.
But
Okay.
unlike this picture, you should have wider sides.
Okay.
And you
Okay.
can imagine the sides aren't going to shrink much up and down. They'll shrink some, but not much. But the middle part is going to shrink a lot. And that's what gathers the sides
Yeah. There.
into
Yeah.
waves.
Okay. Awesome.
So this
Thank.
is purposefully shaping something based on the direction that you're laying the wool. And this is used frequently in garment making. Now, with 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 Nuno felting. Now, when you sew from patterns and from fabric in the more traditional way, you use darts to shape things. I don't know if you've ever sewn before, but you have to have darts for your breasts. You have to have darts in the back of your skirt. You can't do this in sewing, and that's what makes this magical to me because you can shape it like clay almost.
Katie, what about the overlapping? How much do you overlap the two sides with that middle section?
Well, when you put the middle section down, that's a very good question. Why don't I put more of my middle down and then I'll show you that.
Okay. I also wanted to ask you about the tapering on the edges of that scarf. Is that something that's just going to happen naturally? So you're laying out in a rectangle, but then when you do the drawing, it's just going to draw in more on the two ends.
On the two ends, you're probably going to stretch it out a little bit manually during
Okay.
pulling, uh,
Okay.
if you want them to taper out that way. It's timely, static cling.
So about how many inches wide do you think your lay is at this
Putting,
point?
I'm putting 3 rows down the middle. Now remember, mine is going to be bigger than yours too. So you want a minimum, I'd say, of 2 rows down the middle, but 2 rows down the middle because you got another scarf on the other side of your table, and you have to have room between the two. So I would put the middle at just 2 rows. That gives you more room at the sides.
Okay. Are you going to be sharing the recordings with us at any point, or?
Yeah, I'm going to put it on YouTube and send you the link. And I realized I didn't start it until we were, halfway into my talking. But my talking was primarily documents that I sent you and that PowerPoint presentation. So I think we'll be fine. But yeah, I'm going to clip it and then put it on YouTube and send you the link. But it might take a week or a month because I'm trying to prepare for travel.
No worries. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Okay. So for the person who asked about the overlapping, the middle to the sides, I just did a few layers up here up top to demonstrate this. And I'm going to work from the middle with my wool to the one edge of going down this way. I'm going to turn this around, or I don't have enough room in my very tiny place here. And I turn it around and then continue on from this edge to the other side. Just something, a little trick that you can do when you have big pieces and you want, you have to reach over, and you can't reach over the entire width or length for that matter. I got part of my middle done here. Now I'm going to put down my second color to start the edges. And when I do, when I pull out this wool, when I pull out the wool, there's a sharp edge. Gee whiz. There's a sharp edge at the top where my hand was. And there's more fluffy stuff at the bottom. So it's this fluffy stuff that you want to put on the side, overlapping about half of the way, or maybe a third of the way into your middle. And this will give it an ombre effect. If you did the side that had your hand clasp on it, it's straight, and it won't give it as much of a ombre. So when you get to the very edge here, let me take this camera off. You have about a third of the tips into the middle, and then you start your second layer, your shingle, right to the edge of where that starts. So I'm going right to the edge of where the green ended. But the overlap here is about a third. So when I put down my second layer, again, the fluffy stuff goes against the color that you're trying to blend in. So now this blended in has two layers of purple here over the middle. And then when I continue on with the second shingle butts up right against the edge of this middle. So I'm using 3 colors of wool. So the next wool is going to be exactly the same thing. I'm going to use the fluffy ends to blend in there. And then I'm going to use the straight ends to butt up against the edge of the darker purple. And then I'll continue on with my second layer. I'm going to pretend this is my second layer. The fluffy ends are going to go in to the color adjacent to it. And so you can see that it creates more of a blended ombre type of effect. I'm going to take all of this off because this is actually going to be wider than I just showed. Does that make sense?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you.
So the fluffy end absolutely has to go in.
Yeah, the fluffy end, you want at the top of the silk that you're blending into. Because it's fluffy, so it's going to be more, gradual. It won't be like a straight line.
Okay. And as far as the width of this row, this color compared to the middle, remind us of that.
Yeah, you want the middle to be thinner than the sides because the sides, I was getting that out of the way so I could work. So the sides are going to shrink inwards towards the middle, right? Because when you lay wool down like this, it shrinks in that direction. So if you make them wider in the sides, they will not look as wide proportionally to the middle. And the middle will be shrinking like this upwards. But it doesn't matter. You can make them even in the middle and even on the sides. They're just going to get a different ruffly look. The ruffly look comes from this middle going upwards, shrinking, and the sides not shrinking upwards. And so they get ruffly.
Okay. I like wider scarves. I guess that's why I'm asking. I don't want it to be too narrow.
Yeah, then do the sides twice the width of the middle. You know,
Okay.
these, I was thinking a little bit about this morning. These, what I'm attempting to do, and hopefully I'm successful, is not necessarily teaching you how to make something, but teaching you techniques that you can then use later to do in a lot of ways. Like today, we're going to use tencel to replace silk on this scarf. It's teaching you how to put down tencel, how to use it instead of silk. At the same time of making a ruffly scarf, you'll make a ruffly scarf, and maybe the ruffle isn't wide enough for you next time you make it wider, or maybe it's too wide for you, so you make it narrower. You know, it depends on your personal style. And while I'm speaking, I'm looking at this. This is really fun stuff to work with. I already wet it down like I showed you in the PowerPoint presentation, but you could easily, instead of the pencil, for example, you could easily cover it with this. Now, wouldn't that be pretty? Instead of the tencel, I think it would be pretty. Oops, there it is. So you could put that on top instead of the tencel, but you'd have to tack this down a little bit with wool. The tencel, you don't have to. But hopefully, you know, with your first first scarf, use something like this on your first scarf. You can use it on your ruffly scarf if you wanted later on. So they're just primarily techniques as opposed to instructions on how to make something.
Gotcha.
Mhm. Actually, I think I might put this down on my scarf. I really like it. Instead of tencel, I think I'm going to. Now, since I'm doing this, this will provide more resistance for the shrinkage of the metal because it's pretty bulky, so it's going to resist shrinking. So I most likely will have less of a ruffle around the edge, but I don't know. I'll find out.